Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Jamie Kunkle, and I'm joined today with Dr. Janell Payne, and we're going to talk about chronic illness and the rise in this country and probably debatably in the world. Some of you out there may know me. I'm a practicing naturopathic physician in Oregon and California. I've been on this YouTube thing for a while with my current employer, Gordon Medical Associates. I've talked a lot about complicated chronic illness topics over time. And so this podcast is going to be similar, but a little bit different. I'm not going to necessarily be doing as heavy of medical all the time, but we'll kind of see where it goes. I think it's going to be more like a real talk discussion on health and wellness. What I'd like to say is going to be a wellness revolution in 2025 for many reasons. And we'll see. But we're optimistic. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Janell Payne. She's a really good friend and colleague of mine, and we work sort of in similar spaces in the chronic illness world. So, Janelle, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kunkel. I appreciate that warm welcome. So I'm excited to do this podcast. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I know that you and I have been kicking this idea around for a long time.
Mm.
I'm just giving a little background leading up. I'm a naturopathic doctor. Yes, I treat patients here in Bend, Oregon. I see patients in the office. I see them virtually, and like yourself, we treat patients with complex chronic illness. I Part of this is really wanting to reach out and reach a broader audience. So I'm just excited. Like some of our text conversations back and forth, our frustrations with the medical system, our
Mhm.
frustrations with, complications, not being able to see the benefits in getting our patients better in a timely manner. Sometimes I appreciate the camaraderie and being able to go bounce ideas off you. I think this is exciting. We can dive deeper into like some of these areas that we've kind of superficially talked about in many conversations. So I
Oh
look
yeah,
forward.
I'm really excited. We have a lot of content we're gonna bring out here eventually. Today's sort of just a general overview and introduction and get everybody to know what we're about, where we're going. But there's definitely some very substance-rich topics to discuss as we go.
Yeah.
So, one more question. I'm sure some people ask this because working with chronic illness in general, but definitely complex chronic illness, and we'll try to differentiate those a little bit in terms of the terms
Right.
that we know as chronic illness and then what we think is chronic illness. But, what got you into this? It's not for the faint of heart. This type of work is really complicated. It's really energy driven. You got to kind of want to do it, and you got to be, pretty attentive all the time to
Yeah.
things. It's not easy.
You do. I'd say it really drew me in. I say that I didn't choose to treat complex chronic illness. It chose me, and I think that that's probably true for most providers who are in the realm of what we do. Um, I have a personal health story, right? And I think a lot of it stems from, I had a complex chronic illness. I still do to some degree. I just am way more functional now. So I've essentially had my health restored, and I'm grateful for that. I was initially going down that route of taking the MCAT, applying to OHSU. I really wanted to go that MD route, and I don't think that that's a bad route by any measure. However, I went to a naturopath by accident. And she was able to help me. She quickly diagnosed me. She gave me a slew of like medications, supplements. I mean, you name it, right? Kind of similar to how we practice. And within about 3, 4 months, I started getting my brain back and my body back. And then I was like, wow. And I just developed a passion for this medicine. And it was life changing. So,
Mhm.
and then she helped my children feel better. It was widespread and life changing. So I kind of just took a different route and went the ND route instead of the MD route. So that was
Yeah.
my story.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of us have similar stories. I mean, for myself, it was, I think you're absolutely correct. People just sort of find you to some extent too, or maybe this type of practice sort of finds you in some way. I come from Pennsylvania, so the land of tick-borne illnesses and various things. I grew up sort of being superficially aware of some of those elements of chronic illness that were not exactly being very well defined, and a lot of times I had this sense that people were just saying that people suffering from certain chronic illnesses were kind of just crazy and sort of out there and they're depressed. And, the term gaslighting as it stands now wasn't really around back then, even though that comes from an old movie apparently. But, it just wasn't really talked about in that way. So, yeah, and personal family members of mine have been affected by this. Everybody knows somebody with chronic illness now too, and it wasn't that much different back then. And we could debate it's gotten worse, but it's just, so a lot of us have really up close and personal stories with this, and so the drive to try to help others, help ourselves, is big. And I've just been blessed and fortunate. I've been able to retain some level of normalcy in my own health. Not to say I haven't struggled with certain things, but just that like, I don't have a big story like that, but I'm very empathetic to that, having witnessed it firsthand with family members and everything as well.
Yeah.
So thank you. No, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. Okay, so next we're gonna kind of just dive right in, I suppose. We've floated some terms around chronic illness, complex chronic illness, hope that may be out there within these realms and worlds. I'd like to kind of just start off though, um, just each of us probably taking a moment to define our own definition of chronic illness and what that really means. Because from a conventional perspective and what you often see on the media and everything,
Yeah.
when people say chronic illness, they're usually meaning heart disease, diabetes, cancer, maybe. Of course, cancer. Sometimes they'll put chronic fatigue on there as well, which is kind of a junk diagnosis. We'll talk about that later. It doesn't explain really anything. Just that people
Similar to
people are
fibromyalgia,
debilitated.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, fibromyalgia, so there are a lot of those diagnoses that are recognized and they do get lumped into some of the statistics, but I think that a lot of our patients, unfortunately, I mean, they may be lumped in terms of major depressive disorder or they may be labeled with psychiatric diagnoses, but I'm not really sure there's as much acknowledgement about some of these illnesses that we treat. And tick-borne illness is one of those, of course, and there are many others. But so I read a recent statistic. It was suggesting that maybe around 130 million Americans at this time were suffering from some form of chronic illness. And it puts it at a place where the numbers are so high that everybody knows somebody. A lot of people have themselves developed or suffer from some level of a chronic illness. And as I said, that may also just be mental health and stuff like this too. And that obviously had increased significantly at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Janelle, tell me a little bit about how you think about when you say complex chronic illness, what does that really mean to you and
Mm.
how much you differentiate some of these terms in your own?
That's such a great question. As you were saying this, I was like, how would I define it if I was just to present this to somebody? Like, what is complex chronic illness? For sure, I would say complex chronic illness is how does your illness affect your quality of life? Like that's like at the root of all of it. Like it doesn't matter what the diagnoses you have, onslaught of it. It's how much is it preventing you from doing what you want to do, from thriving in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm assessing a patient, when I'm talking about like they can have 15 diagnoses, but at the same time, like, is your quality of life affected? Are the activities in your daily life affected? Are you able to do everything you want to do? And that's really where I think the crux of it is for me. And I may not be answering your question exactly how you presented
No,
it.
it's highly individual. I think that was the point that I was getting at too. When you try to lump statistics, usually public health with the best of intentions is sort of a lumping system. It's trying
Of course.
to fit people into large groups and stuff like that. But whether you are well or whether you are ill is very personal in a lot of ways. And it is about living the best life that you can live, living the fullest life that you can live. And if you feel that you're not living the fullest life that you can live, there may be an illness element there. It may not be that straightforward. It may be a phase of life issue or adjustment to changes in life and
Of
stuff like
course.
that. But if it's a persistent problem,
Yeah.
if it started at a young age, if it developed after some kind of trauma, illness, or some event, and it's just persisted, you can't say that all of those things are just related to age. They often get blamed on age, of course, and age-related declines in function are a lot different. Oftentimes, they're much easier to treat if you just adjust your lifestyle. It's much
For
harder
sure.
to treat these illnesses. They're very resistant to normal run-of-the-mill things, including, but limited to, the simple passage of time, doing absolutely nothing and just waiting
Tincture
for
of
your
time.
body to heal.
Yes. The tincture of
Uh,
time.
yeah, that's right. And
It's
that's what
maddening.
we've found is a lot of, and even in a lot of cases, people who have complicated illnesses, if they're really strong constitutions, they may actually just heal with the passage of time, whether the therapy works or not. And then you're like, hey, that therapy
Right.
worked really well. It's like, no, that person just happened to heal with the passage of
Right.
time. But anyway, so yeah, so my point really is that it's a really individual uh, entity. Chronic illness is very individual, and I think that's where we come from as naturopathic physicians too. Is that we were taught these principles, treat the whole person, treat the cause, understand these things, and most of the time we see diagnoses that really are just sort of superficial labels, what we call syndrome diagnoses. They're based on the symptoms of the presentation of the person. And those symptoms may be acknowledged or they may be ignored in some cases, as mentioned. But there's not really a lot of time and energy always placed to where they're coming from. And that sort of brings us to the where or why this might
Where, the
be
what,
on the rise.
how. Yeah.
Because when did it start? Is this all industrialized society? Is it chemicals? Is it collective trauma? Is it,
All the above.
electronics, light,
Right.
all these things? How do you approach the individual when you're trying to evaluate these things with all these ideas in mind? How do you sort of look at chronic illness as an individual issue when somebody comes to you?
That's another good question. I think it starts with I try to collect like where what are the barriers in your life? Like
Hmm.
again, like what activities can you not do? What is not being fulfilled in your life, right? What symptoms do you have? And kind of going through that. But then I what I like to tell patients is I like to cast a wide net. And that's a borrowed term. Lots of doctors, before us have used that term, but it really does make a lot of sense. We cast a wide net. Ultimately, if they're diagnosed with chronic fatigue, are you diagnosed with mast cell activation, diagnosed with Lyme disease, whatever your diagnosis is, like what's causing that? Like that's not the root of the issue. Like what's causing that and trying to get to those underlying factors. We look at genetics. We look at um, epigenetics specifically. We look at diet and how your body is interfacing with the environment. Are you able to detox? Are you exposed to something in your environment that might be hindering your ability to get well? Do you have chronic infections? And that's a hot topic in and of itself that I'd like to, kind of talk about. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that people get Lyme disease and necessarily get sick. I think that we've had a lot of these things for a long time, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Oh,
Um,
we'll have a whole
we'll have a
podcast
whole,
dedicated to chronic infection itself because it is a very
yeah,
controversial subject. It absolutely is, and it's unfortunate that it's not being paid more attention to, and that even some of the research that's out there, because it is so individual, they make sweeping, claims and generalizations, and it's like the lack of evidence, or the lack of clear scientific evidence is enough to ignore large
yeah,
populations of
yeah,
people and,
exactly.
and, and facts, I mean, it just, and in these individual concerns as they come, like we can find evidence of these infections in these people, we can treat these infections and they can get better. But
Right.
since there's not a consensus on, once again, public
It's
health,
challenging. Right.
it becomes really
Or
challenging.
or the patient gets 60% better and then I always tell patients when they come in like look we're gonna do some trials like we start with lower interventions we move up the scale into higher interventions just like we were all taught and and as we treat the patient more things kind of get revealed like oh you're having a hard time with this like that might be an avenue we need to explore whether it's a lack of detoxification or it's an exposure or you know so I guess that's my approach to chronic
Yeah.
illness with a patient. And it certainly evolves over time. I don't, I really don't love the proverbial peeling the layers of an onion, but it is accurate. It really is accurate. You peel off a layer, you're like, oh, and now we
Yeah.
have to address this, and you peel off another layer. But we have to find a better analogy because peeling the onion is a pet peeve of mine. I
Yeah,
don't know why.
one of our naturopathic principles is the vis medicatrix naturae. It's the healing power of nature. But what it really means is the body's innate ability to heal itself.
Hmm.
The body wants to be in homeostasis. It wants to be working as well as it can from the moment it's first alive to the moment that it's no longer alive. And so it is true to a degree that removing obstructive forces is helping the body get closer to optimal health and
For
getting
sure.
back to that homeostasis. And so there's a whole array of things that can dysregulate. And if you really had to break it down into something simple, it's the confluence of genetics and epigenetics. So what that means is like what we're susceptible to, or what our strengths are too, honestly, because our constitution, genetically speaking, is an array of those things too. We may be really good at certain things, health wise, physically, athletes, or whatever. We could be so many different things. As a strength to our body. And we want to try to accentuate and bolster and support those things. But there may be a few things that maybe we're not as good at doing. Maybe it is detox. Maybe it's, it could be any number of
Right.
elements. And so, and then the epigenetics really refers to the environment, which is the infections and toxins and things of this nature, which ideally would be modifiable. And we can modify a certain number of them for sure, but there
Right.
are some that unfortunately are a little bit beyond our control too, that in industrialized society, there are toxins that we can't really mitigate entirely.
Exactly.
For example, in our food supply, as much as we want to try to get organic, healthy food and everything, that's not perfectly accessible to everybody. Not everybody has a garden in their backyard, although I encourage people to do that if they can. And
Yeah.
hopefully we'll talk about that someday too.
Yes.
Growing your own
Yes.
food. It's wonderful.
And it's
Uh,
therapeutic.
Very therapeutic, actually. Spending more time in nature,
Yeah.
not spending all the time on the,
Vices.
technology and various things of this nature. So there's so much in the world of health and wellness that we can modify. And then there's a few things that are much more difficult that as a society, we're going to have to come together and figure out.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of this talk, though, I said, I'm fairly hopeful. Well, it's a good thing to be hopeful in this world, by the way. It's a good thing to, uh, you know, give well, let's just say allow hope or give the space for hope in this type of medicine because it can feel very overwhelming and very hopeless. But what gives you hope this year? And what gives you hope in this world with all the difficulties, all the things we don't have control over, the rise of chronic illness, the post-COVID era now here, everything.
Oh, that's what gives me hope. Well, if I have to define it, it would be the attention that some of these illnesses are getting now. That gives me a lot of great hope. For example, PANDAS PANS. I treat this condition in my pediatric patient population. It's one of the
Mm.
focuses of my practice. And we are starting to garner a lot of attention. There's research actually coming out in dedicated research. It's getting the attention of major medical centers, OHSU, Stanford, Arizona. Like we have a lot of centers now that are frankly doing the research. They're doing a lot of like cohort studies, and I mean we can go into that, but that gives me a lot of hope and just being able to see the attention that's getting put on this. Our new administration, with RFK, that gives me hope that we might uncover some of the toxicities in our environment. And I know there's a lot of criticisms of RFK, but I think that if we can just look at, like, first and foremost, he's an environmental lawyer. Um, and I think if he can help us identify some of the toxicities, clean up our environment, get some of these additives in foods taken out that should never have been in there in the first place,
Yeah.
I think we're going to make some great strides. At least bringing awareness, and I think awareness is our very first um,
Yeah.
step.
Awareness is a really important first step in these very
Yeah,
difficult conversations. And we have to acknowledge and understand that the science isn't perfect, with these types of things. Do
yeah,
we know 100%? that this chemical or this toxin or this thing is bad for every single person that is near it or consumes it. We don't know that, but it has the potential to be. And you could see other places in the world that have gone to greater lengths to mitigate some of those things, to make those toxins not easily
Exactly.
available, and to give people some healthy alternatives. It seems like if you had to break down the food situation, it would be, if you wanted to really simplify it, you could say that processed food is worse for your health than non-processed food, and that's just a simple
Yeah.
breakdown. And
Yeah.
and if we can just sort of get there, even I think it could be a really powerful change. And yeah, RFK is incredibly controversial for a variety of reasons. We'll probably
Of course.
dedicate a whole talk to that at some point.
Right.
And but if you kind of take the situation at face value, I mean, one, we can't change the course of the election. We can't change anything. We
Of
have
course.
to understand that we are where we are, we're going where we're going, and we gotta think that there could be some positive that comes out of 2025. We're in post-COVID era. We
Right.
have somebody like RFK leading the charge on environmental medicine, and environmental medicine has been one of the least served aspects
For
of this
sure.
type of chronic illness in general. I mean, we can go way back. Humans have made some not so great choices that probably were beneficial in the short term, oftentimes for big businesses and money interests and stuff like that, but have come back later to really harm us. And there needs to be a little bit more regulation on those fronts. That even if
Agreed.
something doesn't have perfect data in science, if there are observational studies, even, which, we'll talk about the difference between observational studies and the standard uh, types of research that's out there that are considered most legit and not. If we can just try to make some of these little changes, get this conversation going, I feel pretty hopeful that we're going to start to see movement. And for those out there, I mean, like I said, we'll talk about RFK later, but it's not like there's going to be a ban on vaccination, or there's not like we're not going to
Right.
see such drastic changes. I mean, those all those things are a lot more difficult to change than we think. But there's always catastrophizing in media and everything when it comes to this. And our goal really with this podcast is, like I said, to talk sort of more real about it. What are we seeing on the front lines? How can we help patients make practical, uh, realistic, workable, decisions to help improve their health? How can we educate them? And education is such a really important piece of all of this, and that's really what this is all about. So, yes, thank you for sharing. So there is hope in
There
2020.
is hope. And you mentioned something there like about educating patients and empowering them, right? And
Hmm.
and I know this is really important to you is that patients are empowered, they have knowledge is power. And
Hmm.
and I tell my patients the greatest thing is when they don't need to come see me anymore, right? They
That's
don't
right.
have to bounce it like that independence like that they can have like okay, you know when your symptoms are coming back, you kind of know what to do. And if you get yourself in a bind, you're welcome to come bounce some ideas off of me. But I love that autonomy that a patient has in their health,
Hmm.
right? They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones
Yeah.
making the changes. Like it all comes from them. And anyway,
Yeah,
so
we're not dictators. I mean,
no.
this type of medicine is not about being a dictator. It's not about, hey, I know what's best for you. I know what's best for your body. I know what's wrong with you. And I'm going to tell you what to do. And if you don't do it, you're out the door.
Right.
That's what's different about this medicine. Naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, which we'll talk about the difference there too, because I largely feel that some of functional medicine stole from us, but we're not as cool on the
I like to think
politically.
that we just borrow from each other. We really just borrow
Yeah,
from each
I
other.
don't I don't want to get upset about it. I've gotten over it a long time ago.
Okay.
But
I hear that. You don't sound bitter at all.
I don't sound bitter at all.
Right.
No. But yeah, we have a different way of doing things. I mean, let's talk a little bit about that for a moment. Just sort of how we do things different in our practices as naturopathic physicians, as functional practitioners. Uh, you know, uh, how do we approach these cases? I think I'll let you lead here, and I'll kind of do some additions
Yeah.
as we go.
In a general sense, I would say I approach it again, cast a wide net. I want to find out as much about this patient as I can. What is contributing to their decline in health.
Hmm.
Then secondarily, I like to work to stabilize the patient. I would say that's probably my main goal. If they come in and we just need to have basic foundations of health, like do we need to like get enough nutrients in them? Do we need to enhance detoxification? Do we need to stabilize an aberrant immune response, that chaotic immune response and control some inflammation? Sometimes I come in with that approach first, and then we start addressing the harder stuff, maybe the infection, maybe really getting into detox, which can make people feel a little bit crummy. So I try to stabilize first and then go in with therapies that we might have to tiptoe into a little more
Yeah.
gently. So
Yeah.
how do
So,
you
I mean,
approach it?
that's different. When was the last time you talked about detox with your primary care physician? Was it,
Yeah, it's been a
I guess
bit.
it's detoxing from alcohol,
They
possibly,
they
or
say, well, what is detox? What do you
yeah.
mean by detox? I was like,
Yeah, don't throw that term
you
around.
know,
Yeah.
getting
Yeah,
things that shouldn't be in your body out, and
it's
it's
really
yeah,
largely seen as like a sort of a pseudoscientific term too. It's like because I
yeah,
mean it is true. If you don't know where it's coming from, you do have to explain it a little bit to people, because there's all kinds of detoxes out there, and some of which, yeah, just the supplement industry or whoever sells them or some wellness guru on one of these types of spaces, pushing this or that
right.
and the other thing. But yeah, what I really like, just at a foundational level, I'd say, one thing that we do different is we spend more time with people. It's kind of a
Hands
novel
down.
concept.
Yeah,
Kind of a
yeah,
novel
yeah.
concept. Uh,
How long are
when I
your
was,
patient visits?
oh, my first patient visits are 2 hours. They're very long.
Time.
They're a little bit of a marathon for both of us. The patients maybe probably worse than myself because they don't feel very well. Myself, I can go recover pretty quickly. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go, sit down, have some tea or something. I'm good to go.
Right.
So yeah, so pretty long first visits, more frequent follow-ups oftentimes. We are really looking from a multi-systemic perspective, which is really what you're kind of supposed to do, I guess, as a general practitioner also. You're supposed to be competent enough in each of the body systems to know when you have to send somebody to neurology or gastroenterology or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But because a lot of conventional medicine is like a 15-minute, maybe even only 10-minute contact in some cases, there's a lot of punting to specialists and a lot of people getting thrown around. And because the healthcare system is so taxed right now, that can take a very long time, waiting 6 months to see another specialist. And so
For
you can
sure.
go, that can turn into months or even years sometimes before people even get the help. So we try to get people help quickly, even though that's a lot of time and sometimes a lot of financial constraint to spend that much time with people.
Yeah.
The results happen quicker because we set things in motion. We know better what we need to focus on, what body
Right.
systems we need to focus on. We still know when we need to go send out to a specialist or do something like that, but we don't limit ourselves too much. We know more what we can do to help, and so that's a really big difference that I see. And I think in all medicine, you're supposed to kind of continue learning and doing continuing education and all that kind of thing. But I really do see people in the functional space are a lot more driven to be on the cutting edge, just really
Right.
know, be evidence-based, but be observational too. Work with colleagues, understand what's working, what's not working, and all that kind of thing. Go to conferences and network, all that really good stuff. So I really see so many people in the space have such a really strong drive to continue learning, and it
Well,
really
we have
shows.
to. We have to because our patients don't fall in the algorithm of conventional medicine, right? A lot of
Yeah.
them, like they didn't have their needs met there. And I get it. The conventional system is dictated by insurance. We all know that, right? That's being highlighted more now than ever. And I feel like again, hopeful, right? I'm hopeful that we'll have some shakeups in this insurance system. Um, Not tragic shakeups, mind you, but I just some systemic changes to our insurance system because conventional doctors, they don't want to treat like this either. They don't like these grueling days of seeing 20 plus patients in a day, 10 to
No.
15-minute visits, and they can't even ask, what the patient had for breakfast. Like they just
Yeah.
kind of get through the basics of the visit and then they move on. And it's unsustainable for patients and doctors. Um,
Yeah, I
so
wanted to be,
I'm glad you mentioned the time.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
wanted to be clear that a lot of the stuff that we do, that I complain about in terms of they're not spending enough time, they're not spending enough attention and energy, it's not necessarily that individual's fault. It's a system issue. It's a
exactly.
systemic issue,
It's a
and
systemic
the
issue.
system needs to change, and that's
Yeah.
really what it comes down to. And all those folks, I've met so many folks that are within those systems, and I was in that system myself, and I'll talk about that at some point. I know so many folks that really are operating with the best of intentions to try to help these individuals, and they really
Yeah,
are doing the best they can with the resources they have and within the system that they're living in. And they have a family and kids and a house mortgage and everything.
yeah,
It's their job too, and they're
yeah.
just trying to do their best in the world, okay? So I just wanted to be very clear when I point out these criticisms. I'm not trying to say ND's good, MD's bad, or anything like
And
that.
I didn't hear that. And that's why, I just wanted to add that, that
Yeah,
systemic piece, because
yeah,
the more I talk to, this outside, conventional providers, right, in these institutions, they often will punt to me because they're like, she'll go give you 2 hours, right? She's going to listen to
yeah,
you for 2 hours. She's going to dig a little bit. I don't have time to dig, but she'll dig. And so I
yeah.
appreciate the camaraderie there. They're
Yeah, especially in the
quick
state
to
of
refer.
Oregon. It's not like
Yeah,
that in every state in this
right.
country, but in the state of Oregon, naturopathic physicians have a pretty long history. We've had licensure for a long time. We've been a part of the medical community. Conventional doctors know what we do. They know who we are. They don't
Yeah,
misconstrue that. They just know. And so I'll even go to see one, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're an ND. Cool. NDs have a place in this." And it's wonderful to see us all working together. Once again, with the same intentions
right.
to help people at the
It's
core.
not always that rosy, but yes, I do. More times than not, I would say I'm warmly received. And
Yeah, it's
there
not
are,
always. We there's
I've
yeah,
had plenty of interactions where I wasn't warmly received.
we all
So,
have. Yeah.
right, right.
It's true.
We've all been there. So, I mean, the reality of that, naturopathic medicine has a lot of ground to still like show worthiness, right?
Yeah.
Prove that we're well educated, you know,
Yeah,
in this.
totally. And yeah,
Yeah,
and we can dive into that sometime too for those of you out there that don't know much about us and our profession as far as NDs go. But yeah, we do go to a 4-year medical school. We go to an accredited institute. The biggest difference, honestly, is that there aren't as many residency opportunities out there and available because there aren't that
exactly.
many of us.
Right.
And that's just not something that was created. And we haven't been allowed to sort of step into conventional residencies and roles. Like the DO, the way of the osteopathic doctor, it was different, but they kind of were their own entity like us. And eventually they were kind of given a lot of the same rights and privileges. And
Yeah.
now they're allowed
Weren't
to
they
go into residencies and do surgeries and all kinds of things. I'm sorry, go ahead.
weren't they adopted in the 70s? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
I believe so.
like it
I
was
think
kind of in
so.
the
I'll have to.
70s. They kind of got adopted into that. And now they're, on par, right? Like
Yeah,
it's seen as an equivalent. And I would welcome the opportunity to be, invited into that space and
yeah.
to, you know,
You know, as mentioned, a lot of us are really hardworking folk. We really do just want to be part of. Yeah, we want to help change the system and however that looks.
absolutely.
And some
Absolutely.
of us
Yeah,
want to do it from within, and I think that that's okay. And as long as those individuals are competent, we have to start looking at people as individuals, really. That you're always going to have folks in any profession that are maybe dangerous or incompetent or
of
bad
course.
things could happen. Yeah, there's a lot of ways in which that develops for people, and some of it is burnout. We'll talk about physician burnout and stuff later.
Yes. A whole
Uh,
episode.
yeah, we'll do a whole episode on that one for sure because yeah, one of the reasons why I like doing this stuff is it keeps me excited in this game too. Is that yeah, if you just are constantly working on the front line, seeing 15 patients a day, oh, it can get pretty hard on you
It sure can.
over time, and that can lead to less than optimal decision making. Mistakes can be made, that kind of thing. But anyway, my whole point was really that if you have a profession that is trained medically that has a place in the broader conversation of helping support and change the healthcare system, uh, we should be allowing those folks to have seats at the table, I think. And it's mostly just a lot of politics. And like I said, it works. It's been demonstrated. It works in Oregon. The West Coast medicine is different than East Coast medicine. There's a lot of I've practiced in both spaces. We'll talk about that sometime, but it's like
Yeah, I want to hear
Tupac and
about
Biggie,
your experience there.
it's
Yeah.
there's some similarities and some differences. So anyway, but yeah, so it's an exciting time for sure as far as where medicine's moving, a better recognition of chronic illness. I think a better recognition of what we define as complex chronic illness, individual empowerment, which I think does start with education.
For sure.
And the more we're able to see that, I think in these coming years, the more we're going to see functional changes. Uh, and yeah, it's a really exciting time. So I think we're gonna be talking a lot more about this stuff. We're gonna be diving in deeper with this subject matter. If anybody has any recommendations on things you want us to talk about, you can
Oh,
leave
yeah, I'd
them in
be
the
really open to
comments.
that.
You can write us. We'll put some contact information somewhere around here. You can ask us questions. I've done Q&As before. I love those types of things. Maybe someday we'll
Right.
do a live Q&A. Those are always fun where you can just sort of shoot from the hip and,
Yes.
non-rehearsed.
So can I ask you a question?
Please.
I want to know, like, what do you think is contributing to the rate of chronic illness? I mean, like, and maybe I should premise this first by like, I just went up and looked, like, just for the sake of having data. I looked up the year I was born, 1974, right? I'm dating myself. I just outed myself big time there. So I looked up the rate of chronic illness in 1974, the rate when I graduated high school in 1992, and then current. It's shocking. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, let me see. I'm going to reference my statistics here. In the, I don't know that I printed it off. It said in this is for children. The prevalence of chronic illness in children in the 70s, and this is 70s, this isn't
Mhm.
specific to like 1974, is 1.8% of children.
Wow.
By the 1990s, that percentage rose to 6.5%.
Oh,
That's a big jump, right? That's in just
big
my
jump.
teenage year, like growing up, graduating high school. And currently, it's suggested that 54%
Oh my
of
gosh.
pediatrics have some sort of a chronic illness.
Yeah, that's a problem. I mean,
54%.
that's a big problem because these are children we're talking about
These
here.
are children.
Children,
1.8%. So in the last 50 years of my lifetime, we've gone from 1.8% of children have a chronic illness to 54%. Those numbers are staggering to me.
yeah,
This is something that like we need to rip the band-aid off of everything. We need to leave no stone unturned. We have to dig into this. Like, I don't mean you and I. This is
yeah,
part of that hopefulness of like, come on, we have to bring some awareness to this. These numbers have to stop. We have to
yeah.
start seeing a decline in that, or a reversal in those rates. Then I looked up for adults. In 74, 10% of the population had a chronic illness.
Mm,
74. And by 1992, 20% of the population had a chronic
wow,
illness. We've already doubled.
pretty
And
significant.
and then now in 2024, 40% estimated.
Wow.
And of that, and I don't know what the statistics are, but like I want to say it's roughly like 27% have two or more chronic illnesses, and then 13% have five or more chronic illnesses. And this is all CDC
Yeah,
data, right? This
right.
isn't like data that I cherry picked.
Which
This is
could be underreported for
CDC.
those reasons we mentioned in terms of
Right,
what the definition of chronic illness is. But that means a traditional nuclear family, two partners, two adults and two kids, half that family may have a chronic illness.
right.
Really, one of the children and one of the adults on average,
On
regularly.
average,
Yeah,
on
that's
average.
crazy. That's
Yes.
crazy to think.
I mean, when I just look at my friend group, my circles, and it doesn't matter what circles I'm in, what socioeconomic circles I'm in, I can see that the rates of chronic illness within the family, I don't know a family without a chronic illness.
Right.
Like, and to me, that's alarming when I just sit back and think about it. These are the things that keep me up at night, right?
Yeah.
Like people are like, oh, what's causing this? Like, yeah, you and me both. Like, we want to know what's
Yeah.
causing this.
No,
There's a lot of
children are supposed to
correlation.
be more resilient. I mean, we
Children
can
are supposed
say
to be more
adults
resilient.
get old and age is a thing. I've said that
Right.
ageism is a big deal in this field where they're like, "Oh, you're just getting old," that kind of thing. But what is the excuse for children?
What?
You know?
Right.
What's the
Right.
excuse there? These are supposed to be resilient, fiery little beings that can, push through a lot of adversity and
Yes.
they heal quickly. So, if you can remove that adversity most often,
Right.
so why are we seeing more of this, right? I mean,
Yeah.
to answer your question of what I think is going on, I mean, first of all, none of us have a clear 100% answer, but I'll tell you a few points in time that are probably significant. The change in our food our food
Mhm.
quality, industrialized farming, and starting in I believe it was the 60s into the 70s, but it got pretty bad near, the middle to the late 70s there. So a lot more chemicals were being used in agriculture, and big farm business. The food pyramid was established at some point there, where it was basically stated that carbohydrates were going to be at the core of all eating and that fat was evil. And we'll talk about why fat's not evil sometime. It does depend on the type of fat, mind you,
Does
but
depend, but
whole foods, there are healthy fats that our body actually needs. Our body processes two forms of energy, generally speaking. One of them is carbohydrates. It's like the kindling for the body. It burns quickly. And then there's the giant log, which is the fat.
right,
So, so basically, in the 70s and into the 80s, it was the rise of like space age food, highly processed foods, these cereals, sugar, and there was a big rise in diabetes and metabolic syndrome.
yep,
And and on top of that, starting at the time of the Industrial Revolution, which was quite a bit earlier, like 100 plus years earlier, we were seeing every generation having more and more and more toxic burden just from general general higher accumulation from industry. And so you have all these things kind of coming together. And there probably are a lot more features. Like right now, we are also seeing the rise in technology. We're seeing that effect on mental health and socialization and anxiety and depression and various things of this nature. And I watched that all happen before my eyes in my generation. I was born in
yeah,
'86, and we went from having maybe a house phone or meeting people at a certain time of the day that we had to really schedule it out and everything, to everything being kind of at our fingertips and having this constant communication line and everything. So it's just
right.
we're living against our nature. We haven't been given enough time to adapt to these
Yeah,
fairly big
naturally adapt.
changes.
Yeah,
And there is a potential for some of us to adapt, and we have to recognize too that there probably is a certain segment of the population that is kind of adapting, and they're kind of doing okay. It doesn't mean that they won't develop cancer or something later, but through the course of their life, they may feel pretty good. They may be getting through their days okay, and all that kind of thing. But there's another percentage of the population, and you can, if you want to, you can call them the canaries in the coal mine. They're telling the rest of us that something not good is happening. It's not
yeah,
something not good is happening, and we got to do something about it. And children, I mean, if nothing else, as they say, let's do it for the children. Let's figure it out
we
for
have
them
to.
because they're our future.
We have to. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I worry about my future grandchildren, right? Like I think
yeah,
of that and every successive generation. Like when I look at my grandparents, my grandparents lived these long, old ages and healthy. And it's not even just their longevity. They lived quality lives, right? Until they didn't. And then I look at the health of my parents that is less than that of my grandparents. And then I look at like the health of my generation and it's less than that of my parents and our kids are certainly, their health is disrupted to a state that it's concerning. We have
yeah,
to. I on the same thread as what you just said, we have to do it for these children and
yeah,
our future grandchildren. It has to.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And there's
and
not
with
one
with a level of urgency. We need urgency in
with
this.
urgency.
With a
Precisely. I mean, and that's why I think we're both kind of excited about some of the administrative changes, is just that there's a sense that there could be more urgency than there has been in the past.
right,
So that's why we're feeling a little more optimistic. Okay. All politics aside, you remove all the politics from this
right.
discussion, is that there is a problem. We need to do something about it. And there hasn't been much done about it lately.
And
Okay.
and we
I mean,
need we need to have some humility in this. Sorry, I'm
yeah.
stumbling over my words, but we need to have
No,
some humility in this because your instructors probably told you the same as mine that half of what we learn is probably going to be proved wrong over the course of our careers, and we just
right.
don't know which half, right?
Right.
So some of the things that we've embraced or we think we know, we have to be willing to let go of some of those thoughts. Like,
Absolutely.
and I
We
tell
can't be
patients this,
rigid.
we cannot be rigid in this. And I tell patients all the time, like, this is what I'm telling you today. Like 6 months from now, I might change my tune, right? So anyone listening to this podcast, just know, like, whatever time date stamp is on this podcast, we reserve the right to change our opinion, like
Absolutely.
as more evidence gets presented, right?
I think
And
that's the most effective physicians practitioners that I've seen are willing to have a little bit of humility. They're willing to reevaluate. They're willing to self-critique in a constructive kind of way. You don't need to be hard on yourself, like, oh, I was such an idiot. I didn't know. It's like, no, we were all doing the best we could at the time. If you are continuing with that mindset of I'm doing the best I can every day, you can let go of some of that stuff. We're going to learn new things. And sometimes the new things we learn take 10 years to actually make any kind of movement or ripples within the
Or
healthcare
longer,
system, or
right? Or
longer.
longer.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
never, because
Yeah.
because of this or that other reason. And so
I,
we
a
need to
mentor of
put
mine said
aside.
that it can take 30 years for like something that comes up in the in the research to actually be enacted, you know? Well, and to get the research data, that takes can take decades to really get that. You know, which is why I think that that degree, that sense of urgency needs to happen sooner rather than later. We don't have decades with our
Yeah,
children. We
no,
just don't have it. You know,
no,
if we suspect that something is going on, we need to reverse course
yeah,
and make those changes immediately so that we can and then move in more slowly, right? We can do some studies at that point. You know,
yeah.
I don't know how that is all going to unfold, but we definitely need to make dramatic
Yeah, I
change.
mean, truthfully, we need to put health above money. I
Mhm.
think that's the simple way. I mean, I know everyone's like, "Oh, that's always been." And it's like I'm not blaming big business for everything, but I
Right.
mean, honestly, it's what's been happening for a long time. But definitely, since industrialized society has sort of been the core of our civilization, it's been short gains. We don't have all the data, so therefore, we're going to keep doing what we do. And by the time we recognize that there is actually a problem, it's already done a lot of damage. We got to
Already.
change that. We got to
Yeah.
stop reliving history over and over again, you
Yeah.
know? And so I am hopeful there's a possibility there. There is a possible way forward.
Right.
But yeah, I think that if it, for better or for worse, if it takes, these chronic illnesses now affecting one and two children, at some point you can't ignore it anymore. And I'm not wishing that on anybody, but we are in a time where I think it's becoming much more difficult to just sweep it under the rug
For sure.
and look the other way. So
Yeah.
that's
Because
where
it's
I'm
happening in
hopeful.
all families.
It
It's not,
is.
it's no longer, it doesn't know the socioeconomic borders. There isn't a
No,
stop. Like it doesn't matter how much money your family makes. What that does enable you is to get access to good health care, right?
correct.
And that's unfortunate. So we're going to have to
Access is an
see
issue. Yeah.
access is a huge issue. Like and you and I have talked about this a lot. Like I toy with the idea of like how do I get bigger, like a greater access for my patients? And part of
Right.
it is doing these podcasts, right? Like I just want
Yep.
to share with you what I know, and maybe somebody else knows more and can piggyback off of that and treat that child, right? Like
Exactly.
so that's our only hope here is
Yeah, that's one of our goals with doing these types of things is really to get the conversation going, to get the knowledge out there, to share our experiences, to share our knowledge. Even if we're not, like I said, 100% right in 5 years, we see different things.
right.
We
We'll
want to
share
try to
that
do
too.
our, yeah, we'll share that later. We just want to try to be part of this change, part of this conversation. So,
Right.
and yeah, there are a lot of people out there that don't have access to this type of care. Unfortunately, they may be living in a state that doesn't have as many functional practitioners or NDs or whoever, or maybe they don't have a lot of money and they can't afford these things. And
Yeah.
you do have to, in some ways, unfortunately, in this world, or maybe fortunately, because this is about personal empowerment, you do have to kind of be your own advocate. It doesn't mean that you go to Dr. Google and figure out how to guide your
Right.
care completely, but there needs to be a certain level of self-education and a
Yeah.
certain level of advocacy when you are seeing your doctor in whatever doctor form that comes in, that your practitioner, whoever that may be. And so that's another reason I think, for better for worse, the internet, media, your phone, I mean, all those things can provide education, more access to education, so that maybe there's more access of, positive things there, even though,
I think there can certainly be some positive things there. If it had not been for the internet, I would have never probably sought appropriate help for my condition. And I was
yeah,
declining rapidly. I mean, I was to the point of being bedridden. You know, I would get
mhm,
up a couple hours out of the day, but for the most part, I was in bed. And this is what went on for about 3 months until I Googled, right? What could be going on with me? And I went down every rabbit trail I could do. And this is before I ever went to into our medical program. And it was shocking because, I'd go to my doctor and he was like, "Oh, Janelle, when you start studying these diseases, you start thinking you have them." And it was like, no, no, no. Like my joints hurt, my head hurts. I had
Mhm.
lymphocytic meningitis, like that's a real that's a real
Yeah.
diagnosis. I had a rash, a visible rash all over my body. Like I'm not making this up,
Right.
like you don't make up a rash. You don't make
No.
up lymphocytic meningitis.
No.
And with lab work to show the levels of inflammation, right? It's just shocking to me at, where how am I trying to say this? You're gonna have to edit this out. Um,
Okay.
yeah. I totally lost my train of thought, Jamie.
That's okay.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a good introduction for kind of where we're going, though. And I appreciate everybody tuning in today. If people did tune in today, maybe they'll tune in later after we've done five more of these things and then look back at this lovely one. But this is our introduction of what's to come and what we're going to talk about. So we're going to go a lot deeper into some of the subject matter. We're going to devote each of our talks to a particular subject that we've spoken about today. As I mentioned, feel free to leave any comments, anything that you want us to talk about. At some point, maybe we'll do a Q&A. We'll probably have some cool guests here at some point. You'll most often probably see Janelle and I together. Occasionally, we may be interviewing other people or kind of doing some other things too. So it's going to be rich in content as we go, as it builds. And I appreciate everybody joining today. Janelle, thank you so much. And
thanks for
do
having
you
me.
have any last moment words of wisdom for the world?
Mm. Just to piggyback on what you said earlier, we need to remain hopeful. So I do think that we're going to see some really positive change. I don't just mean administratively. I think that like with our awareness, we are going to have some cutting edge technologies that are medications and lifestyle changes, things that we can do to like restore our gut microbiome, restore our blood-brain barrier, restore and all things that we'll dive into in subsequent podcasts. But like I do think that we're going to be able to get back that health and restore that. So I just
I
want to
think so too.
end on a positive note because
There's always hope. There
there's
is
always hope.
always hope. The
Yeah.
body can take a lot of punishment too. I mean, but it can.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's always
seriously,
hope.
we there's always hope. People can get better. It is possible. Anybody out there listening with a chronic illness too. People can get better. It is possible. It's complicated. It's become more complicated, and it's not your fault.
Right.
The world has become a complicated place, and we got to do our best to take it day by day, find the right people to help when appropriate. We're social creatures. Be social, find people that can help you, find community, all of it. We'll talk about that at some point too, and why that's important. So,
Yeah.
all right. So we'll wrap up for today. Thank you so
Thanks, Jim.
much. Thanks, Janelle. Thank you for everybody out there in the world that's listening to this. And you will see us again soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Confronting the Complex with Dr. Janelle Payne and Dr. Jamie Kunkle. As a reminder, the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dr. Jamie Kunkle are solely his own and do not reflect the views, policies, or positions of Gordon Medical Associates or its affiliates. Any content, discussions, or advice shared on this podcast are independent of Gordon Medical Associates and should not be interpreted as a representation of Gordon Medical Associates. Gordon Medical Associates does not endorse or take responsibility for any statements or viewpoints expressed in this podcast. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.